Now it's my great pleasure to introduce all of our panelists today. So our first panelist is Paula Frank, Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at ADP. Paula advises business leaders on how to grow and harness the power of diverse teams. In her role, Paula leads global initiatives focused on culture, engagement, talent, development, mobility, and retention of underrepresented groups. She leads the design and delivery of several women and minority leadership development programs and other inclusion initiatives such as Disrupt Bias, Drive Inclusion, and more. Paula, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, our next panelist today is Kate Clayman. She's the Vice President for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Guggenheim Partners. So Kate Clayman is responsible for leading Guggenheim Partners' first vendor diversity program. Kate reports to the head of the firm's Office of Diversity and Inclusion and works closely with the strategic sourcing and expense management team to advance Guggenheim's vendor diversity strategic and operational plan. Kate has assisted in developing and launching the firm's Vendor Diversity Advisory Council, Women's Innovation and Inclusion Network, and the Multicultural Employee Business Network. Kate, thank you for joining us. Okay, our final panelist today is Corey Smith. He's the Vice President of D&I at LVMH Incorporated. Corey is currently the VP of D&I at LVMH Incorporated. Prior to joining in September of 2020, Mr. Smith was the head of D&I for the Major League Baseball. With 20 years in D&I, Mr. Smith has worked in several industries, including manufacturing, technology, education, consumer products, entertainment, media, and sports. His overall D&I experience includes developing and implementing workforce and employee initiatives, such as recruitment programs, learning and development programs, training and mentorship programs, executive rotational programs, business resource groups, as well as supplier diversity initiatives. Corey, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Okay, finally, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Anu Rao, the Director of Business Development at Indotronic Savani Group. So Anu is an experienced business development professional with a demonstrated history of success in the IT and services industry. She's skilled in sales, social media marketing, business group, and she has over 10 years of experience in staffing. Today, Anu serves as the Director of Business Development for Indotronics, as well as the Women and Leadership Co-Chair and Membership Director for ISM, the New Jersey chapter. Okay, at CPAL, on behalf of the whole team, we're really excited to hear from such industry experts. And with that, Anu, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Hello, everyone. 2020 fundamentally shifted the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. However, although organizations realize that DEI is a business imperative, Deloitte's 2020 Human Capital Trends Survey shows that only 13% said their organization is very ready to address DEI needs. Enterprises expect to close this readiness gap by using technology throughout their employees' journey, starting from talent acquisition. However, technology is just a tool. Rapidly evolving business models and the racial and social injustice that has swept the nation in the past few months has demanded a new approach to DEI. So to move the needle to tangible, actionable calls, to transformational culture, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome our esteemed panel of DEI practitioners from very different industries to offer diverse perspectives. So my very first question to the entire panel is, how is your DEI program in 2021 different from the past diversity initiatives? So we'll start with Paula and go on to Kate and then Corey.
Thank you, Anu. It's a pleasure, first of all, to be a part of the panel. And I would say that the difference between the 2020, to 2021 cycle of DE&I has been different for ADP in the sense that we're just moving more quickly. As we look at our data, as we look at our workforce, like many companies are doing since the social justice movement, we realize that we have an opportunity to move more quickly. We're proud of all the progress we've made. We have, women at the executive level at 35% of workforce, and minorities at 25%. But we've put together recently a council to to accelerate that progress. And it's a group of very senior leaders, and there is a lot of accountability and a lot of ownership at the senior level. And we're, committed to, perhaps in the past we could have moved a little bit more quickly. And so we're committed to doing that now. So I would say just speed is what makes it a lot different than programs in the past.
Thank you so much, Paula. I love what you said about speed. So I think we are going to see a lot of good change, and I would love to hear what Kate has to add to that.
Well, thank you. Well, first I want to thank you for inviting me to join the panel, and I'm so honored to be speaking with Paul and Corey, who are such experts in their field. With Guggenheim, we launched our program in diversity and inclusion in 2012, and we've always had a focus on different underrepresented groups, but with everything that happened in 2020, and specifically the social justice movement, we've implemented a few new initiatives that actually our CEO came out with a statement, and he outlined 4 critical areas in different D&I fields that our team is actually working on. So one is an internship scholarship program for students of color who are exiting high school and then entering the college area. And we're actually going to be sponsoring them throughout their college career, providing them with an internship and then guaranteeing employment. And we've had such internship programs in the past, but this is very intentional. And we're really, really excited about this program. And we're joining forces with a few D&I organizations that focus specifically on pipeline diversity. We're also working to invest specifically into Black-owned businesses in addition to our vendor diversity program. So we're also very excited about that. And then to echo what Paula said, we are currently working on a diversity council that will consist of senior leadership to oversee all of our current employee groups. So we're accelerating and adding to our current initiatives, and it's really exciting time.
I love your use of the word intentional. I think that's what it has to be to see real change. And I can totally see a child who's gifted, if he has that kind of scholarship, how it can segue into a whole family moving to the next level. Thank you so much, Kate. And at this point, I'd love to hear what Cody has to share with the panel.
Absolutely. And of course, I'll echo the sentiments of thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be with such a great panel. LVMH, the changes have been plentiful in the last year and varied. I think for us, we're a really large organization. LVMH has 75 different companies under its portfolio globally. Our headquarters is in Paris. And so we're technically a French-owned, French-run organization in which there are different approaches to D&I depending on what region of the world you're in. And so for us, it's really been how do we standardize across the globe to ensure that our employees understand that they are a priority to us regardless of their dimension of diversity. And so we have had long-standing initiatives across the D&I predominantly from a gender perspective. So over 10 years ago, LVMH launched an initiative to increase the presence of women in senior leadership positions. And so that's an initiative that's been really long-standing. And the percentages have increased well over 20 points in 10 years in the increase of women in senior leadership positions. Our employee base is 70% women. Our customers are 80% women. And so there was a priority for gender diversity and equity across this industry, for a really long time. I think what has happened in 2020 and moving into 2021 is we recognize that there also now needs to be as intentional a focus on the other areas of diversity, such as ethnicity and race, sexual orientation, so on and so forth. And so there are more proactive initiatives around developing equity and parity from an ethnic perspective now. And 2020, that has definitely been the focus for us. I think another important result of some of the injustices and racial tension, for lack of a better term, out of 2020 is employees are more vocal, right? They want to see their organization lean into these moments. They want to know that their organization cares about being on the right side of things moving forward. And so not just our employees of color, but there's also been a rampant increase and welcomed increase in terms of allyship as well. And so, all of that has resulted in the organization saying we can no longer just sit by and be silent as it relates to some of these things that are happening. Our employees expect more of us, and therefore we must deliver.
Corey, one sentence that really rang very close to me was employees are very vocal. We have so long been uncomfortable having so many discussions. Now it's high time. And I am so grateful for living in this moment. Thank you so much, Corey.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that input. And very cool that 70% of your employee base is women. And that's a very interesting perspective as well. At this point, I'd like to veer a little bit off topic. And I would love each one of you to share a fun fact about you. I'm feeling so like Alex Trebek on Jeopardy. So let's start with Corey.
Oh, wow. I was trying to come up with something cool and innovative and fun about myself. I think my family would probably say I have it's a slight obsession with my sneaker collection. I am definitely, I think I'm reformed, although I'm still buying plenty. But I easily have over 250 pairs of sneakers. And so it is a thing that started with me when I was very young. And it's probably my biggest, I'm what you call, in the sneaker world, they call us sneakerheads. And so, yes, I have an affinity for, I probably spend way too much money on sneakers, but I have quite a bit.
Thank you, Corey. That was a very candid and a fun response. Thank you. Kate, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
I don't know how fun this is, but I think most people wouldn't know this about me just by meeting me. But I was born in Siberia, and I grew up speaking Russian and Ukrainian till I learned English, and then unfortunately forgot Ukrainian. I still speak Russian, but Ukrainian just went out of my head.
Actually, that is very cool. No, I wouldn't have guessed that. And I have known you for years.
Yeah, I've known Kate for a long time. I did not know this.
And my real name is Yekaterina. I just never tell anyone. So I'm like, oh, it's a mouthful.
I'm going to remember that next time I meet you in person. Paula, now share something about yourself.
So I was also trying to come up with something cool about myself. And I would say I'm a very competitive game night person. So pre-pandemic, like I take game night very, very seriously and like developing teams. I love like, just traditional game boards like, like Monopoly, but I also love games like Catchphrase, just the drama, a team winning over another team. I'm super animated. And so I enjoy game night probably a little bit too much.
There's a funny movie you should
It's
watch.
so fun that you should mention that. I am like you.
Are you? Oh my gosh.
We have to have a virtual game night.
We should. That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing that little bit about yourself. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it too. There were a couple of questions I already saw in the Q&A, and it was something I wanted to ask all of you. How does your corporation measure or plan to measure DEI? Because measure what matters is what they say. And unless you can measure something, you cannot improve it. So what do you measure? Metrics, KPIs?
Yeah. I can start. So, ADP is a data company, so we're all about the data and measurement. So I would say that we, in DE&I, like you said, in order to see any kind of progress, you must measure. We measure everything. We measure, obviously race and, makeup of workforce by race and gender, sexual orientation, people with disabilities, veterans. But there's so many other things that we measure, like, tenure and, age and different things that make a population diverse. Our KPIs have shifted quite a bit. I think, as you're looking, as an example, one of the things that we saw when we were looking at our data last year was that, companies talk about this broken rung, so where people sort of get stuck in the leadership pipeline. And so our broken rung happened to be, women getting from the manager level to the director level. So we were very intentional of creating this program called Advancing Women in Leadership. And the program is really, to give the women all of the tools and the, exposure, the sponsorship they need to get new opportunities and get to the next level. So I would say, a program really cannot be successful if you don't first have a baseline and use the data to sort of influence where you'd like to see, your workforce, how you'd like to see it grow and change and improve.
Thank you so much, Paula. I love the use of the term broken rung. And it seems like one of those things that really yielded result once you saw that there was a gap in the movement from a managerial level to a directorship level. I'm sure many people in the audience now will be queuing up to be a part of ADP.
They should. Come join us. We're always looking for great talent.
Thank you, Paula. Kate, I'm going to ask the same question of you.
Sure. To echo what Paula said, we are very intentional about measuring who we hire and the demographics, and if people choose to reveal their sexual orientation or veteran status. But one of the things that we really focus on in our team on measuring is also the number of employees that join our employee resource group events, how leadership is involved in the different programs that we have throughout the year. We always have an annual diversity summit. We have programs surrounding the different recognition months. So we view participation and engagement as an important part of our data, and seeing also we measure changes in benefits as measures for success. For example, increase in paternity leave or increased benefits for transgender individuals. So things like that we also factor in, just to show that, we're a company that cares about different differences that people may have.
Thank you so much, Kate. I myself have had the privilege of attending a couple of Guggenheim events, so I know what you're speaking about is not something that's just being said. Thank you for that. And I appreciate, many of the things that we talk about, including things like paternity leave or consideration for transgenders. It's surprising, even today, not many companies talk about those things. Appreciate what you are doing in that field. And the same question to you, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what's already been addressed, so I won't repeat those. I think what we are actually trying to really in the middle of the process of figuring it out right now is how do we attach metrics to advancement and promotion, right? So less about, because we've already been tracking what the demographics of the organization look like, but how do we add D&I metrics to our performance review process, our promotions process? How do we hold managers accountable for mitigating their bias when they're providing employee feedback during that performance review process? And there's a way to attach metrics and KPIs to that kind of conversation. And so we have organizational management review processes, and then we have our performance review processes, and those are not the same. The organizational management review process is, let's look at the opportunities across the entire organization where we can potentially pull a top talent from one of our companies and place them in a higher position at another one of our companies. And that's the benefit of having an organization that is so broad and so big and so global. And so what does that process look like from a D&I lens, so that you're not always pulling the same type of person? Even if they're considered top talent, we want to make sure that top talent is as diverse as possible. And then again, as we all know, the higher you move up the ranks in an organization, the less diversity there is. So what is the process that we are going to implement to ensure that diversity is getting the same opportunities to rise in the ranks? And so again, there are KPIs that we're literally in the middle of introducing and implementing, that we're going to hold everybody to the same standards.
Thank you so much, Corey. The one thing that resonates with me throughout the panel is how much work is being done and quickly in the past few months, right? And that makes me feel hopeful. There's one point that you mentioned about how you take a talent from one part of the company and move them to another part of the company because it's a global, that just resonates the whole concept of total talent management that has been going around in the staffing industry, where you have a global view of all the talent in your company. That's just awesome, Corey. Thank you so much. One of the things that I'm sure all of you have already realized is that creating an anti-racist DEI change agenda is very tough, and mandates around culture change will be met with apathy and resistance. In fact, a recent Wharton UPenn study found a huge chasm between organizations just doing DEI work and those that are actually valuing the DEI work that's being done. So with that in mind, my next question to all of you would be, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a DEI program? And this one, I would start off with Corey, and then Paula and Kate.
I mean, without a doubt, what you're talking about is that level of buy-in, right? And what happens is usually the top buys in. CEO, executive leadership, they buy into any D&I objective because they recognize that it has direct business impact and can in fact drive profitability, whether it's internal initiatives, which are employees, or external initiatives around branding, marketing, and gaining market share. So you get top level buy-in, you get bottom level buy-in, because quite candidly, that's where usually all the diversity in the organization is, at the lower levels of the organization. The issue, to your point, is always that mid-level management, because those are the groups in the organization that are completely measured only by metrics and their performance. They have to just drive, right? They have to deliver. They manage the direct reports below them, productivity, efficiency. Let's drive the profitability that the CEOs need to see. And so if you don't make diversity a metric for that mid-level management, they're never going to really be completely engaged. They're just driven by too many other factors that occupy their mind around performance results. And so for us, again, I go back to it's what's already been said. What gets measured is what matters. And so you have to tie metrics in. But, I think the reality is, within just the last year alone, there is this new empathetic view to diversity, right? Where people weren't necessarily reacting to it purely from an emotional or personal perspective, or at least bringing that emotional perspective to work. And so now that's happening, especially in the middle of a pandemic where work is at home. And so, you're seeing people's personal lives literally on your Zoom screen almost at all times. And so I think there's kind of this mixture or combination of work and personal, and it's forcing people to react in different ways to these subjects. But you're absolutely right. Not all of those reactions are positive. There are, unfortunately, people in all of the organizations that we work in that don't believe Black Lives Matter, for example. That's the reality of the situation. Not everybody's going to be on the same side at all times. And so the work of the diversity, equity, and inclusion department is to manage the organization through that.
Thank you so much, Corey. What you said about mid-level managers, I was reading a very interesting article as a prep for this panel about a Boston Consulting Group paper, and they concluded that it's frontline leaders, and in other words, mid-level managers, who make or break progress on diversity. So very, very interesting. Paula, if you could answer the same question.
Yeah, sure. I echo everything that Corey said. I think it's spot on for ADP, and I think organizations looking to have a meaningful DE&I program, you must have commitment at the senior level. So starting from your CEO and that executive committee. I think it's so much easier for ADP, for us and as DE&I practitioners to do our job, because our CEO, our president and CEO and President Carlos Rodriguez, he is very much committed to DE&I and and our entire executive team. And it was helpful that they were so committed, as when we started, call it in the summer with this social justice movement. And, as Corey had mentioned, associates being very, very vocal and wanting to know what our stance was on, Black Lives Matter and all the things that happened, that was happening outside and coming into, the sort of four walls of a company. And so, our CEO put out a statement and then had other conversations with other people, on the executive committee. Our executive committee, every Friday, they would put out sort of like a business update that included, why DE&I is so important to the organization. And we really just did a lot of grassroots things. Like, we started to have conversations about race. And as you know, having a conversation about race in an organization forever has been taboo. You don't talk about race and politics and religion and those sorts of things. And now our senior leaders, they were saying, this means a lot to us. This means a lot to our associates, especially our Black associates. How do we start having meaningful conversations? And we started to do just that. We had a bunch of conversations. We called them lean in conversations about race, and they were powerful. We all learned a lot from each other. We opened up, people asked questions that they wanted to ask for, probably decades, and found a safe container to have those discussions. So it would not have been possible if we didn't already have that sort of really strong framework from our senior leadership. So I think it's very critical to have that.
So true. It has to be, as you said, from senior leadership and grassroots level. And I wish I could attend one of those lean-in conversations.
They were great. They were really, really good. Yeah.
Yes. And honestly, Paula, the amount of reading up I have done in the past year, there are some amazing web series that I've followed. Like, there is one called The Uncomfortable Conversation with a Black Man.
The Black Man, yeah.
He is awesome. Emmanuel.
Yeah. Those are great conversations, great forums for sure.
Yes. That is the only way to move forward, to understand, to read, to experience. The same question to you, Kate.
So with, and I echo, with Paula and Corey, what they pointed out as challenges to implementing a very effective D&I program. One of the challenges that I know that we experience at Guggenheim is that, there is not one size fits all strategy for all of our teams. For example, our HR team is composed, I would say it's about 85% female. So the focus for that group is increasing racial diversity within HR. But same thing for our securities team. They had a really big focus on increasing racial diversity, but also in investment banking specifically, they really wanted to know how to increase their gender diversity. They had one female investment banker in their analyst class. And, what we realized was that we can't have the same approach, the same external organizations working with everyone at the firm. And so we're a small team, but we decided to do almost kind of consulting efforts with each team to have a specific strategy that might work for them to enhance their D&I efforts, in addition to them having access what we make available to the firm. So that's one approach. Another challenge we had, I think, there's this mindset with employees in general that, if they do not see an increase in diversity, they go to us, the small team, and say, well, we don't see an increase in diversity. And it's hard because you have to make sure that everyone feels that D&I, it's a firm-wide effort. And yes, there's a team devoted and there's a leader and the chief diversity officer, but the whole firm has to put in an effort to making sure that D&I is effective, that it's important, that every individual feels like it is a necessary and part of the business imperative. And I think that that's sometimes hard for some employees where they're like, well, what are you guys doing? Are you guys, where we want to see more diversity? Aren't you guys doing stuff? And it's like, well, I myself cannot make a manager hire a team. I can only consult and, suggest and provide opportunities to find the diverse talent. So there's just sometimes this misconception, I feel, among certain employees in general, I think. And I think Paul and Corey probably maybe have experienced some of that too.
You bring up a very valid point. The objective of how diversity is viewed in different groups is different. An HR group, the concept of diversity is very different than from a technician group. That is such a good point you brought up. Thank you, Kate. And kind of it segues into the next part of our conversation. Numerous studies have shown, and a recent one was done by Harvard Business School, and it shows that an Emily or a Greg are more readily hired than a Lakisha or a Jamal. Ethnic names on resumes get up to a 50% fewer callback. We all know that, or maybe even experienced that. So, but the good news is, despite these challenges, corporations have come up with creative ways. All of you kind of touched upon it, but would love for each one of you to share some creative ways to source a diverse slate of candidates. And if you can share an example, that would be great. We start with Paula.
Yeah, so I would say attracting diverse talent, it really, it starts with the job description. So what does the job description look like? We work with a company that basically sort of scrubs our job descriptions and make sure that they're not overly masculine, or not saying things like must be aggressive at selling or whatever it is, or his using pronouns like his or her, and not being inclusive to our non-binary community. So really making sure that job descriptions aren't putting people off. Like when they read them, they say, this company seems a bit exclusionary maybe, and it may be not a great place for me to work. So I would say, starting with companies that can help really review job descriptions and make sure that they truly are modern. They have a human, a human voice, maybe attaching personas to job descriptions so people can kind of like see themselves in the job and want to be at that company. And there's so many companies out there that specialize in that kind of work. So that's an example that I would share.
Thank you so much, Paula. I really enjoyed your use of those examples, like using binary terms instead of he or she, and the language in being not exclusively masculine. So addressing biased language in job postings, I think, is a huge part of this exercise. And the same question: how do you source creative ways you source diverse candidates to Corey?
I echo what Paula said. It definitely starts with the job description, but for us, the next part of that process is where are we actually sourcing the talent from, right? And so it can't be as simple as just posting on LinkedIn or or we need to be more intentional in looking at sources where diverse talents are. And so, the pipeline from historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, women's colleges, what is our access and more importantly, our relationship with those types of institutions, so that even if we're not recruiting direct from college, we are in constant communication with their alumni group as they move through their careers, so that as they develop experience, we can recruit them later on down the line. And so for us, some of the onus we actually had to put on ourselves. Are we even branding ourselves as an employer of choice? Do diverse people even want to come work for us? We assume that we're the greatest and biggest luxury company in the world. Everybody wants to come work with us. But the reality is, if we are not reflective of diversity and inclusion, why would they? Right? And so again, some of that is, what do we look like to the outside world? When we are interviewing, are the interviewers diverse in the slate of interviewers that are interviewing people? But, so we have some internal work that we need to do ourselves. But I think for us, the sourcing pools are as critical, making sure that we are partnering with organizations, with search firms, with whatever databases that themselves promote diversity and inclusion. They have a pool that is diverse and wide reaching. And again, across all dimensions of diversity. So, gender, obviously ethnicity, but all the other dimensions that, are intangibles that you can't physically see. Those are our priority as well to us, right? Workplace diversity, where you've worked geographically, department-wise, your skill set, your experience, all of that resonates in terms of diversity and inclusion. Again, we're a global company, multinational company. And so for us, you being able to leave New York to go work in London, or go work in Paris, or go work in Singapore, there's a value add to your ability to have that type of flexibility. But what does that mean? That means that you potentially then might need to know how to, like Kate, speak 2 to 3 languages. That's diversity. Being bi or multilingual is diversity. And so there's some upside to that in an organization that is multinational.
A powerful statement you made. Do diverse candidates want to work for me? Very powerful. Thank you, Corey. Yeah. I will ask Kate to share her views on this topic.
Well, no, I think Paula and Corey made excellent points, and those are really important in making sure that you get a diverse slate of candidates. One of the things that Guggenheim is looking into, and we've been doing a lot of research and implementing in 2021, is our version of the Rooney Rule, which is something that the NFL implemented, where you are required to have at least one candidate from a diverse background for the role. Guggenheim is looking to do actually more than one, having to have a hiring manager include at least 2 candidates that are from diverse backgrounds, because we've seen a lot of research where it shows that it doesn't really work when it's only one diverse candidate. It's kind of like, oh, I need to do this, I'm just going to throw one candidate in the applicant pool. But if there's at least 2 from underrepresented groups, there's a much higher percentage of that person actually being considered and hired. And so that's something that it's a goal for us for 2021 for mid-management and above. And then at some point, we're hoping to implement that throughout the firm.
Thank you so much, Kate. I do know that it increases exponentially if the number of candidates is increased in the applicant pool. I know that I have a lot more questions with all of you. I have a board game night with Paula, and I have to talk to all of you. But I know we are running up against the hour, and I'll hand it over to Sheila at this point. Thank you so much for all the precious input from everyone. Thank you, and Sheila, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Just echoing Anu, I think this has been a great panel discussion, and we've definitely had a very active chat. So it's great to see how many people are engaged. We do have to end at noon sharp, but I have a couple quick questions that I just hope we can talk about in the next 3 minutes. So the first one, I thought this was a great question. So KPIs for diversity, equity, and inclusion in small companies. So back down to like the SMB size, how do companies get started with those KPIs when they're at a smaller level? So anyone on the panel can take this. Paula, I know that ADP is a numbers company, so maybe I'll pitch it over to you, but anyone hop in if you have some experience.
Well, I would say the first thing to do is just, get a sense of the baseline, like what is your workforce. So the first thing to do in my mind would be to run a self-ID program. So ask your associates to, to self-ID, to tell you who they are, like, in terms of gender, sexual orientation, disability, etc. And I think once you get a sense of who self-ID programs or campaigns are tough because you absolutely want to wrap that program and make sure that people understand what your intent is with the data, and that they trust that you're doing the right things with that particular data. But I think once you have an understanding of your workforce, it's much easier to set KPIs. And without me understanding the makeup of the company, I don't know that I could say exactly what that might look like. But I think it's really important to start with the workforce demographics, and a self-ID campaign is probably a great way to start.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just understanding where you are and then where you need to go.
That's it.
Okay, great. This is the last question, just because I don't want to ask a really involved question and then cut you guys off. That's the worst. So this is a broad question. Anyone can hop in. So what are the panelists or your D&I predictions for 2021? Do you see these initiatives growing? Do you see any potential challenges? If you had to tell someone one opportunity and one challenge going forward for D&I in the next year, what would it be? Again, anyone take it. It's very open-ended, but here, maybe Corey or Kate, I'll put you on the spot since Paula just answered the question. So,
I mean, I will take a quick stab at it. I think there's just going to be more growth and more opportunity, clearly. I want to say that, everything that happened in 2020 was not simply a moment. I'd like to say it wasn't a moment, it's a movement. And so, this is not going to go away. What I hope is there's actually more international discussion on this, because I think too many countries still view this as just a US issue.
that's a great point.